So welcome back to my channel. This is Dom, and a question posed by Little Wars TV. Is historical gaming dying? As far as I can remember, I've been gaming for well over 30 years, probably getting on 40 years if I'm honest. And if I'm honest also, I would say that this question about the death knell of historical gaming, or the end of historical gaming, has been going for pretty much every year of that 40 years. It seems to be the most common refrain. Nobody's coming in. It's because when you go to conventions and you go to shows and you go to competitions and you go to clubs, there's more grey-haired older players than there are young people. So everyone goes, oh, that must mean it's dying then. And I don't actually agree with that. So I'm going to address some of the questions that Little Wars TV raised, and I've seen a couple of follow-up videos from people talking about this issue, and I thought, you know what, I'd just do a quick review. So I'd love to know what other people think, and by all means do your own videos and talk about it to your heart's content. So let's look it off one by one. What do I think is going on in the world of wargaming now, and why do I think that historical gaming is not dying? So first up, I think and I have no, it's purely anecdotal, I have no evidence other than my own discussions with people and my own experiences. So, you know, that's my biggest caveat to this whole video, is that I don't know by numbers, but all I do anecdotally is that when I go to conventions and when I go to shows, when they're happening, even down at the clubs, there are far more younger people playing historic gaming than ever used to be. Now, that's in itself is an interesting thing and a good thing for the hobby. But what's really interesting is the changeover in how people play games. So there's less now around so back when I started, there was the weird bunch in the corner that did the board games. There was another weird group in the middle who did fantasy, sci-fi stuff, and then there was the historic gamers, and there was very little transition between the two. A few of the grizzled grunyards used to go and play a bit of board gaming, and a few of the and actually very few board gamers came and played figures. But anyway, you get the point. But the swap over between those groups was minimal, if any. What seems to have happened, from what I see, what I hear, what I talk to people about, is that blurring between the different categories of gaming has changed. So a number of people I know, I game with, friends with, talk to with on a regular basis, are heavily into all kinds of gaming, whether that be board games, science fiction, fantasy, historical, and even traditional games, other sorts of games. So the sort of that crossover seems to be much more marked now. Now, to me, that's a good thing, but it means that maybe people aren't playing historical all the time. So, you know, there's that, there's a variety of what people play. I also do think that historical gaming has changed considerably. Again, back when I started, it was the old Featherstone era, Featherstone Grant, the era of massed battles, massed figures, huge numbers of figures, refighting to some degree historical games, historical battles, and trying to be as accurate as they possibly could. And they were stats driven, they had tables and all sorts of things. Now, that type of historical gaming, I think, has and is dying. And it's been replaced by a whole different version of wargaming. So the sort of bolt action, the black powders, the sharp practice, and there's a myriad other rule systems. They're just the ones that I happen to know particularly well out there that are based on history. But the purists, the real historians, the people who are really into the historical wargaming will probably, well, I know, turn their nose up at it. And I think that's what's interesting, is the change in the hobby. And I do think actually that's been responsible for a lot of newer players coming into the hobby. I know several who have come into the hobby in quite a young age and were attracted in from 40k or fantasy of some sort to play historical games because Things like bolt action, things like black powder are easy to play and easy to pick up. Cruel Seas, those sort of things are really easy to pick up. They are historically based, not superbly accurate as in historical play, but they have the flavour, right? And that gets people hooked. Now, I do think also one of the things that's changed in my lifetime, God, I sound old git, is that back when I was a lad, we used to do a lot more history in school used to be a lot more about battles and big events, that sort of thing. Now it's much more social history, and kids don't learn about the big battles that we did as kids. And that was the bit that got me really excited. And I loved all that. Couldn't get enough of it. So I think there's a degree of kids coming into the hobby now, and it's a broad generalisation. There are some that are very familiar, but a lot of them just don't have the grounding. They don't know about things. They know about big things like Second World War, but you start talking about the Franco-Prussian War or the Crimean War or I don't know, something even more obscure, and they probably have no idea what you're talking about. So there's a big education thing that needs to be played out, and that's the biggest challenge I think with historical gaming right now. There's so many periods out there, so many interesting things to do, but kids today don't necessarily have the grounding that we did as kids. So that's a challenge, but I don't think it's stopping people coming across, and I do think therefore there's an inquisitiveness. I do think also what has improved considerably is you see more women and girls involved in gaming, and that's fantastic. And again, I think that's partly that crossover from the fantasy into the historical that never used to happen. There always used to be girls playing D&D and stuff like that when I was a kid, but they never played serious games. But now you go around conventions and you go around halls and when they're running again, and you'll see women, quite a few of them, and they're not just being dragged along by their husbands and trying to sort of stop them spend money or anything like that. They're there in their, playing, doing what they want to do, and that is fantastic. I'm so pleased to see that. It's about time too. Now, one of the things that definitely is the case with historical is that it tends to be dominated by old farts like me. And I think that's primarily because we have more disposable income. And I think a lot of us, me included, started doing a lot of gaming when we were younger. We didn't have very much money, but we played a bit and we played what we liked. And then real life got in the way, work, family, all that kind of stuff. So it sort of slipped away in the background. And then as you get a little bit older, you start to need your hobby space, you need your hobby time, and you've got a bit more money to spend on things. And then that's where we start spending money, and then through to retirement. So I think that's probably why there's more grey hairs. But I do honestly believe that, and talking to some of the manufacturers, I mean, we were fortunate to talk to the Perrys recently, and also to Offensive Miniatures and others, and you look at the Wargaming survey, I think that, in some ways the hobby has never been in a better position. The interest there is in historical gaming is amazing. The ranges of figures out there is extraordinary, in all sorts of scales, in all sorts of materials. Then there's the 3D hobby, which is just coming in, and having a huge impact, potentially will have an even bigger impact on historical gaming. So all the building blocks are there, and I do believe the audience is there for historical gaming. And I believe, again anecdotally, because I don't have any data to back this up, that more and more people are playing historical gaming than ever were before. It's just different historical gaming. It's not necessarily pure natural. It's not necessarily pure. It's a bit more skirmishy, a bit more comic booky historical. And personally, I can live with that. If that means more people are playing, buying up figures, buying games, and playing new rules, then fantastic, good on them. I think the beauty also of today is that we have all those tools, this thing, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Discord. Discord is an amazing resource, which I think Wargamers have just woken up to. Pandemic has certainly helped with that process, connecting people, getting them talking more, talking about rules, planning new projects, asking for advice. You know, the point I was saying about less people having the historical background that we did as kids is helping with Discord, because people are saying, you know, I don't really understand what I should be doing here, and you know, can someone advise me what I should do with this unit? And us old gits and others who follow that, who know something about the period, can help them, and that is fantastic, you know. And I just think it is I've said this before on some of the streams we've done, is I do honestly believe this is a golden era of historical gaming. I think the opportunity to play pretty much any period you want, in pretty much any scale you want, in pretty much any type of system you want, has never been more obvious than it is now. There's plastic figures, there's metal figures, there's resin figures of all different sizes, scales, types, that are reasonably affordable. The other thing that's absolutely fantastic is that a number of companies, and some people don't like them, but people like our friends at Warlords, put together really nice box sets. Boxes of everything you need, a whole army, all the rules, all the dice, 2 armies, all the dice, all the rules you need to play the game. And that's fantastic. So anybody starting out in the hobby can just pick up that box and go, there's what I need to start the hobby. Fantastic. We never had that as kids. You know, back when I started, you had FX plastics, you had minifigs and Hinchcliffs, and there were a few other smaller manufacturers, but that was pretty much it. And the metals were ridiculously expensive compared to the plastics. Plastics were only 20mm and not very good, and so it was pretty limited ranges. Now, you know, what's it? Perry box of 40 figures, 20 quid. Victrix, 60 figures for 30 quid or whatever it is. Even metals, pound a figure for nice, beautifully sculpted figures that are just so gorgeous. Just unbelievable. So I honestly believe we're in a golden era of historical gaming. I think to say that it's dying, in my experience, is completely wrong. And I've heard this every year in the last 30-40 years, so I don't believe it. The pandemic will be a huge challenge to some manufacturers and some companies, and maybe it's a regional thing. So, you know, the Little Wars are in the US, and it was noticeable the number of the people they interviewed about this were American. And I think because America is very, their wargaming scene is very shop driven, so people tend to go to their local store and play there. As a whole, there's less clubs, it's more around the shops and the stores, that the stores have had a hard time through the pandemic, and they are struggling, and I get that. I think in the UK and other parts of Europe, we're more club driven, so we go around to meeting halls and clubs and what have you, so we're less dependent on the shops. In fact, the shops have largely died, which is a real shame. So it's mostly mail order, which is booming again. So I think it's maybe in some parts, maybe the US, but you know, I've never seen so much activity in Europe. A number of manufacturers that in the last few years come out of Italy, out of France, out of Germany, out of Greece. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And then further afield, you know, I know the Australians and the New Zealanders are very active in the gaming world, and I'm sure I'm missing all sorts of other parts of the world that have very, very active wargaming scenes. So maybe it's just the US is dying. Historical wargaming in the US is dying, maybe. Over here, I don't think so. I think it's the golden era. That's my view. So there goes my pontification about that. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Do your own videos if you want, or just comment down below. Anyway, hope you're all doing well, and I will see you again soon. This is Dom, signing out.